this video, it is the first drive of the team associated DC10 rear-wheel drive competition drift kit. I've got it fully assembled. I'm using a Radiolink RC8X controller. I've got the DC10R ESC, black box ESC on it, along with their 13.5 turn competition motor, Zapper's 4000 milliamp 2S LiPo, and the Reedy RT 2007A servo, all controlled through the RevOx from RevD. Some RevD wheels, RevD tires on it. I'm going to have separate videos of the build process and testing a lot of these components. This right here is literally going to be just the first drive of it. Box stock configuration, except that I did choose there's two options as you build it, either low motor or high motor, and you have to change like this upper plate as you do it. I did choose the upper motor configuration for two reasons. One, it actually physically helps move the motor back on the chassis by, I don't know, an inch plus, something along those lines. And it does the same for the battery. The whole battery actually shifts back a pretty noticeable amount as well. So that improves our total overall rear weight balance. Now, I'm really curious, before we drive it, let's see what the total weight is of the car here. No body yet, but front rear weight balance and total weight of the vehicle. Here we are, fully assembled, all the electronics on it. The only thing we're missing is the body, and check it out. 1,209 grams. That's actually not very bad. I'm very surprised. I actually thought with all the plastic and like the excessive, I'm going to call it excessive battery tray and stuff like that, I actually assumed that this car was going to be heavier. 800, just shy of 800 grams on the rear makes it a 66% rear weight bias with the high motor, which moves that back, and the battery moves it back. I do think that's going to be very important for this car, because if you do move those components forward with the lower configuration and the battery forward, you're going to be sacrificing, I think, a big amount of that rear weight bias on the car. But 3466, 400 on the rear, 400 on the front, 800 on the rear. We can work with that. All right, literally first drive, stock alignment, stock everything. We got the inside wheel locking a little bit. Right front wheel wants to lock. I need to check out what's up with that. Fine, drifting a left-hand corner, but a right-hand corner, if you get into it too hard. Maybe it's a little bit of an alignment setup. Car is rather predictable. I can put it basically almost exactly where I want it. So that's a good thing. Let's see a kind of a tighter corner here. Let's see what that, yeah, that front wants to come back around on you a little bit. So far the ESC, I mean, it's a basic setup on the ESC. I just tuned a couple little small things that I knew, like it had drag brake and I didn't want that. There you go, there's that wheel sliding again. So I didn't want drag brake and I didn't want a few things along those lines. And so I took some of that off, and honestly the ESC feels great. Smooth power delivery. That 13.5 turn motor has all the power that I would want, but then also a nice control. 25 tooth pinion. 25 tooth pinion, and I have no issue with control here whatsoever. One thing I noticed is the turbo does, the turbo does take a minute to ramp in. It's not instantaneous like I typically like my turbo to be. Let's try some bigger corners here. Big sweeper. See how the car likes it. Big sweeper. So I think the ESC has just a little bit of tuning, and then it's going to feel great. I have no issues with the motor. Everybody always says you can't run a race motor. Oh, the magnets are too strong. Look, it rolls beautifully. The motor's not too strong. The magnets aren't too strong. It'll let the car roll just as nice. You get off the gas and just let it coast. It works just great. I don't know why everybody's so picky on that. This motor and this ESC combo in here feel great. The servo's nice and strong, nice and fast. Does everything that we want it to do there. That 130C Zappers battery, plenty of power. Alright, let's get this back on the workbench and look a couple things over on the front. Eyeballing the fresh scuff marks on the rear tires, looks like that rear camber is set just about right for these Rev D tires. What I did notice a little bit while I was assembling it and thought I was just being silly is that it did not look like the steering was traveling the same both directions. Yeah, look at that. So of course I don't know on a GoPro fisheye lens. See, that leading wheel's not quite getting over there to the 90 on this side. Over here, bang! It looks great. No issue at all. But this way, it won't quite get there. So I need to look at that. I have steering endpoints and everything set 100% on the controller. I have the steering trim and sub-trims all set at 0. So that's odd. I need to mess with that a little bit and see what's going on there. Bobby dang, there we go, look. Beautiful. Beautiful. For whatever reason, in this RC8X, I actually had to go past 100 in order instead of 113 to get it to go the correct direction left, and I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if it's a controller issue or if it's legitimately a little bit of asymmetry in the suspension design. But there we go. I'd be curious, that might make a pretty big difference. Now let's give it a tight corner here and see how that front alignment feels. Oh, look at that. That's a lot better. Turns out giving yourself full steering travel, that's important. Helps you from spinning out a lot if you have the full 90-degree steering angle. It allows you to do a lot more crazier stuff without spinning out. You'll notice compared to the first couple laps we did on the test drive, I'm getting a little more comfortable with the car. Getting a little more confident in the car, and now I'm starting to carry more speed. Those tires are probably scrubbing in a little bit as well. One thing I really like about the chassis so far is it appears to be very responsive to changes. So your mid-corner, like coming in here, And I need to let off to change the arc through there, and it just accepts it and goes. So that feels pretty good. I think overall, I don't see the car moving at all. I see a little bit of squat. I don't see that front end moving at all. I think the front end is way oversprung. So with this weight on it, the rear suspension actually feels just about right. And you can see there on the ground, when I would get into the throttle, it would clearly pull the rear down a little bit. Like you could clearly see we're squatting, which is what we want to do. When we hit the gas, we want that rear to squat. We want the front to come up. But honestly, we're sitting here, the front's sitting at the absolute max of travel. I have no more upward movement whatsoever. It's just absolutely maxed out there. Front, the shocks, of course, they're team associated shocks at the end of the day. The shocks feel beautiful, but the springs are just too stiff. Now there's some different springs in the kit, and so maybe we can just swap out some of those and see if that helps us. I think this might be part of it here. There's been multiple things in the instruction manual that I found a little bit as a head scratcher. It says that when you use the high motor setup, which I am, to use the hard yellow, these are the yellow, hard yellow springs in the front. Now, why that doesn't make any sense is because when you use the high motor setup, you move the motor to the rear and you move the battery to the rear. So you're physically taking weight off the front end. And then they have you using the hardest spring when you have the least weight up there. When you use the low motor, which has more weight on the front, when you use that low motor, it says use the medium green spring. Yellow, green. That is noticeably softer. Now, there's also a soft black, which is a little bit softer yet, but the issue with the black, so here we have yellow, green, black. The yellow and green are longer springs, which is what I want in the front of my drift car. I want long springs up there to help it give it a lot to travel. Blacks are shorter. They're shorter. So we're going to, just with what's in the kit, we're going to go from this yellow to this green and see how those work. Now that is much better. That is noticeably softer. It doesn't immediately just jump all the way. It doesn't like jump to the top of the shock travel, but I think we're still pretty much there. I have just the smallest amount of lift. The smallest amount, so it's actually sitting in that travel somewhere. Once we get a body on, it's going to push it down just a little bit more. That is a good thing. The other change that I might make is actually stand the shocks up a little bit more. So I may move that lower shock mount. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to move that lower shock mount in one hole. When you do that, it gives this more leverage on it, and in essence makes the shock a little bit, the spring a little bit softer yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We now have movement on the front end. The suspension's actually doing something now. Look at that. That's a good idea. I'm a big fan of letting the suspension suspend a little bit and like work as in a vehicle in general. So this is definitely the right direction. I'm not going to soften it up anymore yet because I need to do the final tuning with the body on, and I don't have the body on yet. So this is directionally better. I think it's probably a mistake in the instructions where they say use the yellow instead of the green with a high motor mount. Yeah, that's driving beautifully. Beautiful. That's what I was looking for before. You can set it exactly where you want it. Final thoughts here on the team associated DC10. At the end of the day, I have to say it really does well. I was a little skeptical. I was a little skeptical as I was assembling the chassis, and I was looking at a couple of the choices they made, like the battery holder, like the front hub, some stuff along those lines. Few of those were just a little bit of a head scratcher as far as like, why did they do that? Why did they make it that either complicated or overly built? Like, it kind of feels like some people who are used to making off-road buggies and stuff, who are very worried about strength and durability of like crashing and making sure your battery doesn't fall out, as an example, is my best example back here. Like, things like that, you can tell that some of that is here. This big front bulkhead is going to be plenty strong. You can see that on a buggy and it would not break when it hits something, right? Is there a way that this could be dramatically thinner and lighter? Is there a lot of things on this car that I think in that vein could probably happen? I think so. I think there's some stuff like this. Is this like a perfected design? Maybe not, but does it go around a drift track? Does it drive beautifully? Yes, it does, with only a few very minor tweaks out of the box. I changed the springs because I think their instructions about which spring to use I think are wrong if you're using the high motor mount. So I changed some springs in the front. I changed where the front springs mount in order to give us some actual articulation on the front end. And that's actually it. As far as the core chassis goes, that's the only thing I actually changed. And so you can completely get this kit, assemble it, and go around a drift track straight out of the box with the factory alignment. I think there's some more to be done here. I think there are definitely some folks, me and some others, who will be coming in here and maybe tweaking the front suspension alignment. Although honestly, I am pretty dang happy with the front suspension alignment as it is now. I could see potentially some different knuckles. I measured this earlier. It's like 210 millimeters wide at the moment, so that's going to be hard to fit under some bodies, so I'm going to have to look at narrowing it in, maybe removing some of those hex spacers that are on the front, some stuff like that. So I think there's a few things there that are going to have to be tweaked, but otherwise, use its electronics, use the Reedy electronics, and the servo work fine. Drift car does fine. So the real question for me is, who buys this? Who are the folks that I think are the ones that are going to go out, buy this, and enjoy it? I think really it comes down to two groups. I think the group number one, and probably the predominant group initially, is going to be folks like me. Folks who have already had a Yokomo, have already had an RDS, have already had an MSD, have already had a Shark, have already had a lot of them, right? Sakuras and everything like that. Have already had a lot of these cars and just want to try something different. I think for those folks, this chassis, 100% appropriate. I think if you are curious about getting a new drift chassis, you just want to try something different. You just want to not be the 5th Yokomo or the 10th or 15th MST at your local drift track or the 20th RDX because everybody wants a RevD RDX. If you want to stand out, just be a little bit different, this is a very reasonably priced, easy to get parts for, out of the box does great, and probably if you're a little bit experienced, you'll be tuning some of the shocks and maybe tweaking the front suspension alignment just a little bit and doing great. I think that's camp number one. And if you are in camp number one, I can wholeheartedly recommend this chassis. I think it will be a good choice, and I think you will enjoy tuning it and driving it and proving a bunch of the naysayers wrong. Camp two is team associated folks. So the folks that are used to doing the off-road racing, the on-road racing from Team Associated, and they've never dabbled in the drift side. Those are folks who maybe, like I was when I first ever started getting into drifting, was like, who's MST? Who's Yokomo? I've never heard of these companies. I only know of other, racing or bashing companies or crawling companies. I don't know of these names I've never heard of. They've heard of Team Associated. They know Team Associated from their race vehicles. They're probably more likely to go to this kit for a drift car than anything else. And for those folks, I also think this is a very solid choice. You could even move, it turns out, your race components, your servo, your motor, your ESC. You can move all of that, your battery, you can move all of that over here. Yes, you need a gyro. You probably already have a fancier controller than this. So really, you have all the components, except for a gyro, and we can help you get that set up at your local drift track, or if I have a video on it or something along those lines. So if you're a team associated person and you've never tried drifting, you basically have everything that you need in order to get started, except for a gyro, and we're here to help. The drift community is usually quite accommodating, and so if you are thinking about that, please reach out. We're happy to help in any way that we can. We want you to come drift with us and enjoy this part of the hobby with us. The person that this chassis is probably not as much for is the new person. If you are absolutely new, you haven't been around team associated racing, you haven't been around drifting, and you want a just absolutely out of the box, you want to try drifting and you've never done RC before, I'm going to say this is probably, as of today, July 2024, this is probably not the chassis that you want. And the only reason why I say that is because there's not very many of them that have been in the hands of folks like myself who could help you. And so there's not very many of us out there. So if you go to your local drift track and you're having issues with the car, there's not going to be as many people there that can help you set it up. So you're probably going to want to go with one of the more tried, trusted, popular brands, because just like I said earlier, if you show up with this, you're probably going to be almost the only one with it. If you show up with a Yokomo or an MST, probably going to be multiple people there with them who have already gone through some of the tuning headaches that you're going through, some of the issues that you're going through, and can help you. So that, I think, would be my only hesitation for someone who is brand new to RC and brand new to drifting, is that there might not be as wealth of a knowledge online, on YouTube, at your local track, things like that, in order to help you, as there will be with other brands. I think this thing's great, and I'm very happy to have it, very happy to try it, and expect to see more of it on my channel as I continue to tweak it. If you want to see anything else that I've done as I set up the electronics or anything else in this car, there's going to be a playlist popping up over to your right, and I'm going to be populating videos in there as I test each one of the components, install and test each one of the components, and continue to tweak the car over time. I hope to see you in one of those videos. Thank you, and goodbye.